Jones is paying out close to $50 million in defamation charges against Hook victims' families. What is the function of a figure like Alex in a post-conspiracy world? And what does he tell us about our relationship with media and news sources? Hello there, you 5.8 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining me on this voyage towards the limitless oneness that will be revealed from within if you continue to explore the depths of the great Atman, or the soul, depends what you want to call it. Alex Jones occupied a significant place in American culture and news media. Let's not forget that as Trump ascended, Jones was granted almost unique access. People like Joe Rogan have him on the show regular. I've been on Jones's shows before, and I think he has a lot to contribute in very interesting ways. Of course, his comments around Hook, he admits they were untrue, and they obviously caused great distress. Any parent, or perhaps any sane person, would recognize that if something like that was said after the tragedy of the murder of your children, it would exacerbate the grief in ways that are difficult to contemplate and imagine.
Stopping it there, and welcome to Mika Reaction Views, reacting to things on the internet. And today we're returning to Russell Brand, and he is talking about Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones. I'm not gonna lie, I definitely hesitated to react to this. Like, I contemplated just doing it on my other channel because honestly, like, even mentioning Mr. Jones in a YouTube video is like kryptonite for people's channels. YouTube shadow bans it and stuff like that. But the more I listened to Russell Brand talk about Mr. Jones, he expanded on his point. And Russell Brand has a really good talent in doing that. He takes hot topics, people that are in the headlines, he brings them into his channel, he talks about them, and he discusses the situation, but he has a really good talent in expanding on that to sort of like transition into a bigger discussion, and that's what he does in this video, and therefore I decided to go ahead and react to it. But just in case the YouTube overlords are watching, I have no opinions about Mr. Jones. I think what he said about is despicable, and he already admitted that he was wrong, and we all agree that he was wrong in saying that it was a hoax or whatever. Anything else Russell Brand says around that, that is his opinion. I am just reacting to it, and I'll give my commentary. But anyway, guys, we're gonna right back into it. But before you do, if you like this type of videos, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link in the description box below, and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, subscribe. And another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below. And if you like, you can super thanks. Other than that, sit back, relax, and continue to enjoy the video. All right, here we go.
But how did we find ourselves with a figure like coming to such prominence? And what is it that he offers that so many people care so deeply about?
A jury in the Jones trial ordering the conspiracy theorists to pay $45.2 million to parents who lost their 6-year-old son in the Sandy for calling it a hoax. The punitive damages awarded today come on top of another multi-million-dollar penalty in just the last 24 hours.
I know people that went down to Hook to do relief work, offering sort of mental support to grieving parents and various forms of spiritual support. So I suppose I should reiterate at this point that saying that Sam Hook was a hoax and causing additional distress to such distressed people does warrant a kind of recompense of this scale. I'm certainly not seeking to undermine that verdict or in any way support Jones in saying those things.
For you, I will second that. I do not support Mr. Jones saying that it was a hoax. And if you do something wrong, you have to pay the crime, right? If you do the crime, you have to pay the time. I think Mr. Jones having to pay out the family is the right thing to do because, again, he did something that he shouldn't have done. However, the amount seems a little extreme to me, and according to Kim Aversion, she was a reporter on The Heel. She reported on this and she said most likely he will not be paying even close to that. He most likely has insurance that would cover it, and there's probably a statute of like a limit that you can sue for, and so for the most part, the maximum he may be paying is $9 million, if not a little bit less, but there are more court cases happening, so it will add up. I think there's like 2 or 3 more to go, so it will add up, but he most likely has insurance to cover a lot of this, and apparently he has like over $200 million. I didn't know he was like that. Like, I don't know if he was in the bank like that. But anyway, I still agree with Russell Brand that he did something wrong. You commit the crime, you have to pay the time, and I think Mr. Jones himself has admitted that, and I think he himself has said, yes, I did something wrong, and I will accept whatever consequences come my way. So we can all agree with that. Now we can move on with the video. All right, let's continue.
Years, Jones told followers Hook was a hoax staged by the government to crack down on guns. Jones finally admitting on the stand what the world knew years ago about.
It was, especially since I met the parents, and it's 100% real.
What's interesting to me about this story is not Jones saying things that are unacceptable to grieving parents. I think all of us probably have the same opinion about that. What's interesting to me is that Jones operates in a space that isn't covered by anybody else, and not just because there's nothing to cover there. These days, increasingly, you see people called conspiracy theorists, like me, for example, because I'm saying the government and big business and the media cooperate in order to tell stories that nullify democratic process and prevent ordinary people from having meaning and agency in their own lives. That's a conspiracy theory to say that, when it's plainly true. When we saw in the last couple of years a wealth transfer where the most powerful interest in the world benefited from the... That sort of sounds a bit like a conspiracy, but it's not a conspiracy. Again and again on this channel, we say, don't espouse theories and ideas that can't be underwritten with proper facts. You've got to be able to say, well, look, these people spent money to do this. These people lobby with these groups. These politicians own shares in these interests. Julian Assange uncovered this information. Edward Snowden said this. You know, if you can put together a lot of information, particularly information that's verified by rubber-stamped academic agencies or blue chip media organizations, you can build arguments that are outside of that remit. But I think as a figure, Jones is more like a shaman or evangelical preacher. He operates on the periphery of a culture, telling you stuff that sometimes seems mad and hysterical, but many times, of course, not this terrible example around, but many times he's been ahead of the curve. He's talked about stuff like bioengineering, he's talked about financial corruption, he's talked about elites collaborating. There are examples of things that Jones has been ahead of his time. You have so many examples of powerful interests concealing and managing information.
Stopping it there, I totally agree with everything Russell Brand said. Just because it doesn't go with the mainstream narrative, just because the mainstream media or legacy media isn't repeating these things, doesn't mean that it's always a conspiracy theory. I also agree with him that you should collect as much actual factual data and information, so when you do have that debate with someone, you can have a strong argument to back it up, so you don't look like you're wearing a tinfoil hat and you've just been stuck in your basement too long. Not to say that everything has to be provable right away, not to say everything has to have a tangible evidence, but it's best to have those things. Not every so-called conspiracy theory is equal. Again, running around talking about like 5G and, you know, lizard people and clones, unless you got some data or some facts or some evidence for me, I'm kind of gonna like, you know, come back to me when you've ironed out your argument, you know what I mean? But anyway, let's continue.
Creating misinformation and disinformation agencies to control stuff. I mean, when have you ever seen a powerful politician in the last 20 years come out and go, we were wrong about that. We told you stuff at the beginning of this pandemic because we were being optimistic and we were quite wrong. We should have said this. I apologise. Yes, it does seem weird that these organisations are making so much money. We should have done something about that. We should have prevented that. We should have done more to manage the consequences of the financial crisis. These are all things that are handily parked and partitioned off in the realm of conspiracy, which are actually very important pieces of information that all of us should have immediate access to in a transparent manner. What creates conspiracy theory? Lack of transparency. Knowing that powerful organisations are operating in their own best interest while lying about it. That creates the conditions for conspiracy theory. So Jones, I think, is an example of someone who's emerged because there was a need for Jones. In the instance of this terrible Sandy Hook,
I totally agree with him. A lot of the media, again, especially with the 2-year global virus, blamed right-wing QAnon Trump supporter for the mistrust of the public. No, that wasn't the reason. People didn't trust the government and Big Pharma and Dr. Fauci and the media and legacy media and the narrative because it didn't feel right. It wasn't consistent. There was a lot of flaws in it. It was flip-flopping back and forth. A lot of things they said that was true turned out not to be true. And a lot of things that was said to be conspiracy theories also turned out to be true, factual. And so it's like that's what creates people to run down to the normie person that's just espousing whatever their assumptions are about what's going on because they no longer trust who's supposed to be the trustworthy, you know. And instead of like looking within and going, we are the problem, we need to reconnect with the public and we need to build trust, they just turn the public against each other, right? They're the fault. Your neighbor is the problem, the Trump supporter is the problem, the QAnon person is the problem, the libtard, the sheep, whatever, they're the problem. It's like, no, you're the fucking problem. You've been caught in lies, you've been caught in inconsistency, you've been caught in a lack of transparency. That is what creates, again, fandom when it comes to Mr. Jones. But anyway, let's continue.
Book disaster and its subsequent legal complications, we see where such things are harmful and damaging, and clearly a big financial cost as well as a cultural one is being paid. But what's also interesting, in my opinion, is that we have powerful agencies, recommended and ratified news media sources that behave in a comparable manner without the same results. Perhaps not something as serious as claiming something was a hoax when it wasn't, but certainly, for example, not being open to discussion around a variety of potential remedies in the pandemic. That was spoken about in a derisory way that I wouldn't say was entirely scientific. No one ever talked about natural immunity. No one ever talked about going outside. No one ever talked about exercise. And there were concerted efforts to prevent that from happening. These kind of actions lead to conspiracy theory. If you don't want to have conspiracy theorists, and if you want to cut off the credibility of conspiracy theories, what you need to do is, of course, not create conditions for them to flourish in. So what does that mean? Powerful figures that are absolutely transparent and 100% honest, and when they make mistakes, admit to those mistakes plainly and publicly. Organizations that are answerable and accountable to the American public or the British public or the Senegalese public or whatever public is relevant. A situation where we know how money is got and we know how money is spent and we know how it's administered. We know how our bureaucracies operate. Instead of which we have obfuscating systems where it's impossible to know what's going on. All we know for sure is the powerful appear to be corrupt. Situations that are terrifying and damaging for ordinary people, whether that's the Ukraine war or the pandemic, seem to be beneficial to certain groups who don't appear to be entirely accountable, who appear to be profiting in situations that are detrimental, damaging, even life-threatening for ordinary folk. If you have that kind of situation, then of course the world is open to figures that are interested in ideas outside of the mainstream. Take the whole Russiagate controversy. That was an engineered conspiracy theory which was regarded as, oh, you're a whack job, it's definitely happening. Turned out to be a total construction of the Democratic Party.
Stopping it there, my biggest takeaway from this video when I first went through it, and why it made me want to actually react to this, is when he talked about how people that should be held to the highest standard are held to lower standards than someone like Mr. Jones. You know what I mean? It's like Mr. Jones and other people that are not in politics, that's not in government, that's not seen as the leaders of this country, are held to higher standards than our actual government, than our actual politicians, than news media, through mainstream media. Why aren't they apologizing? Why aren't they falling on the sword and saying, we fucked up, we messed up, we're sorry, we didn't know what we were doing? Why don't they ever admit to those things? And it's really, really annoying how, again, yes, Mr. Jones fucked up. He should pay for his crimes, but it's like, why is he held to a higher standard though? It's so frustrating to me. That's one of the biggest takeaways I took from Russell Brand's video. It's just the hypocrisy of it all. It's just a blatant hypocrisy and a blatant bias that is like we're just kind of forced to sit here and take it. It's like they keep feeding us bullshit. We keep being like, no, and they're just cramming it down our fucking throats like over and over and over again. it's so obvious, and it's maddening to me, and it's almost like insulting to my fucking intelligence, and probably insulting to yours. I'm done with my rant. Let's continue.
Take the Wuhan lab leak theory. Oh, there's no way that there was a lab leak. Increasingly, it seems more likely that there was a lab leak. We're continually told that the most dangerous conspiracies are the conspiracies that emerge from individuals online, whether that's an individual like you or me or Jones, who has a voice and has InfoWars and has a degree of power and influence. Those are the conspiracies that we're supposed to focus on. But the real conspiracies are, of course, the ones that are in the hands of the powerful. The organization of reality, the organization of faith and beliefs, whose story wins, whose story is true, and whose story is deemed to be a conspiracy. That is about power. There are some things, like the Sandy Hook example, that plainly is not true, and to say that it was a hoax, that's now been penalized. But Russiagate, Wuhan lab leak theory, the fact that many people have profited in the last few years, the relationships between secret agencies in the United States and big tech companies and my country, your country, the Five Eyes program. There is enough stuff going on to warrant us being cynical, skeptical, and discerning when it comes to dealing with mainstream media narratives.
I like that he used the word discerning. That's a very like spiritual word. It's kind of the same thing as like intuition. I like that he used that because, you know, Russell Brand is a spiritual hippie, so we all know that. And I use the word as well. I go back and forth between discernment and intuition. I also want to say that he mentioned earlier, the news report mentioned earlier that Mr. Jones finally admitted. Mr. Jones has admitted that he was wrong years ago. He admitted it on Joe Rogan. This wasn't the first time he's ever admitted it. Russell Brand also sort of referenced Mr. Jones as being sort of evangelistic pastor. I would agree with that. That's the energy he gives. And sometimes I think because his energy is so over the top, it does turn people off. It gives very tinfoil hat, just the way he's very passionate and energetic. And sometimes it's a little bit over the top for me. I can't sit there and really just listen to him because it's just, his energy is a lot for me, but it's perfect for other people, and that's fine. But anyway, let's continue.
Take, for example, Chris Hedges, who 10 years ago was a New York Times journalist and now can't be allowed on Russia Today. Take the example of Glenn Greenwald, who was once a hero of the media and now is dubbed a conspiracy theorist because of his research and revelations around the Hunter Biden laptop, again, which was initially referred to as a conspiracy theory. The people that have been adjudged as conspiracy theorists throughout the period of the pandemic have often contributed to arguments that have become more and more valid as time has gone on, through their discernment, through their questioning. My idea is, my notion is, my fear and my suspicion is that the term conspiracy theorist is used to prevent legitimate questioning of centralized state financial and pharmacological power. For a while, it was considered a conspiracy theory to say that, hey, maybe the media don't report on the pharmaceutical industry responsibly because of all the funding. But then we saw this.
CBS Health Watch, sponsored by Pfizer. Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Pfizer. Making a difference. Brought to you by Pfizer.
So, before you call someone a conspiracy theorist, make sure that there aren't facts at play. And given that we live in a world where there's a lot of room for theories because a lot of things are masked and concealed and very little light gets out, there's room for this kind of thinking. There's a necessity for this kind of thinking. What I believe is important, same as what Edward Snowden taught us on this channel. The worst conspiracy theories are the ones hidden in plain sight. The attempts to bankrupt ordinary people, to continue to centralize power, the continual attempts to disrupt democratic process by very powerful centralized financial forces. That ain't a conspiracy theory. That's a conspiracy fact. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these.
That's it, guys. That was Russell Brand talking about Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones. I don't know why I'm doing that. Anyway, I agree with pretty much everything he said in this video anyway. I'm not the biggest fan of Mr. Jones, to be completely honest. Again, his energy is a little much for me. I think that, in my opinion, sometimes him drinking on air and stuff like that is a detriment to himself. That's just my opinion. But I still agree. I don't think the main point of this video was Mr. Jones. I think the main point of this video is, why do people like Mr. Jones exist, and why did it have such a large fan base? And it's not because everybody's just radicalized, again, right-wing QAnon Trump supporters. It's because people are searching for answers because they feel like they're being lied to. That is the reason, and people need to respect that and understand that instead of just criticizing and demonizing like they tend to do. And in my opinion, the best way you can really figure out the truth, again, is use your own discernment. I think discernment comes from tapping into your own intuition. It can come from your spirituality, your spiritual walk, your spiritual journey, your spiritual connection to God, prayer, meditation, really contemplation, but also intellectual pursuits like research, reading, asking questions, curiosity, stuff like that, right? God gave you a compass for a reason. Use it. Anyway, tell me what you think about this video, guys. What I said, what he said, and what do you think about this whole Mr. Jones trial thing? I watched a little bit of it. It felt like an SNL sketch to me. That was just my experience, but let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal me link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, you can help. Of course it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. And another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below and links to all of the alternative platforms I'm on, my socials, including my Twitter. All the ways to support me and all the ways to contact me for business is always in the links down below. And if you like, you can super thanks. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle. I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below. Also in the comment section, hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel on Instagram. My stories is usually what's most up to date, and I also have my other channel, Speak Freely, links down below. And you guys have an amazing day.